Hi guys, tonight we are going to follow something very simple. A hand reaching for the same place it reached yesterday. A path walked so many times the grass no longer grows there. A moment repeated without thinking that somewhere along the way became the only way things could be done. You don't notice it yet. You are not supposed to. The habit begins before awareness does. There is someone crouching near the edge of a stream. Early light. The water is cold and shallow here, and the stones beneath it are pale and smooth. This person has come to this exact spot before. Not once. Many times. The way they lower themselves, the angle of their hand breaking the surface, it is practiced. It is not something they decided this morning. It is something their body decided long ago, and the body remembers even when the mind has moved on to other things. They drink. They sit for a moment on the bank. Then they return the way they came. That is the whole thing. That is where we begin. Not with fire, not with invention, not with anything remarkable, just a person, a path, a place to drink water, and the invisible groove worn between all three. If you enjoy this kind of calm storytelling, the kind that moves slowly, that doesn't ask much of you, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe to Gentle Human History. And if this kind of quiet sits well with you, leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. Tell me what time it is. It's always something, finding out where these still moments land. Now let yourself settle. Wherever you are, let the weight of the day soften just a little. There is nothing to figure out here, only things to notice. The path back from the stream is worn into the earth like a sentence repeated until it becomes a refrain. Feet have fallen here so many times that the soil is packed and the roots at the edges are exposed, pale and reaching. Walk it once and it is just a path. Walk it twice and it begins to feel like the right way. Walk it 100 times and there is no other way. This is how habit begins. Not in a moment of decision. In repetition so quiet it goes unnoticed. There is a place near the water, slightly elevated, where the ground is dry and the trees thin enough to let in the early light. Someone stopped there once, long enough to eat something, to rest, to watch the open ground below. They came back the next day. And the day after that. Others began to stop there too. Not because anyone said to. Because the spot was good, and humans are good at recognizing a good spot when they see one used. Now there are shallow depressions worn into the soil. Not from digging, from sitting. From being in the same place often enough that the earth gives way. That is the beginning of somewhere. The waking comes before light. Not always, not in every season, but often enough that the body has learned to expect it. Something stirs. An animal nearby, or the cooling of the air before dawn, or just the ancient rhythm that has no single explanation. The eyes open. There is a moment of stillness where nothing happens. Then comes the slow unfurling, the stretch, the pressing of palms to the ground, the check of the surroundings that happened so automatically it would be wrong to call it thought. This is the first habit of every day, the coming back to the world. It happens across every fire, every shelter, every settlement, every era. The specific details shift. The basic shape does not. Something wakes you. You take stock. You begin. The hearth is the next thing, or the space where the hearth will be, or was, or is. Fire needs tending in the morning or it is gone, and everyone who has lived with fire knows this so thoroughly that checking becomes instinct. The small ember that survived the night is found, is fed, is coaxed back. This takes a kind of attention that is not urgent but cannot be distracted. You have to mean it. You have to give the fire your full, patient focus, and the fire either responds or it doesn't. And if it doesn't, you start again. Research suggests that early humans maintained fire for days or weeks before fully understanding how to reliably restart it. The effort of keeping it alive created a new kind of daily obligation, a new habit born of necessity. Tending fire is one of the oldest repeated human acts. Standing near it, feeding it, watching to see what it does. The behavior sank so deep into the pattern of daily life that the fire became the center that other routines arranged themselves around. Waking happens near the fire. Eating happens near the fire. Resting happens near the fire. The fire does not move, and so over time, neither does much else. There's a woman sorting through what was gathered the day before. She does this every morning in this same spot, pulling apart the bundle, setting things in small groups by type or size or condition. This is not something anyone taught her. She watched someone else do it once, probably many times, and then began to do it herself. And now it is simply the first task that follows the fire. The sorting. Her hands work without consultation. They know what belongs where. They know the feel of what is still good and what should be discarded. The knowledge lives in her fingers before it lives in her mind. This is something early humans were likely very good at, learning through watching. Long before anything could be written or spoken with precision, the details of a task passed from one person to another through careful, patient attention. You watched the person who knew how. You watched until your body understood the rhythm. Then, one day, your hands began to move in the same way. The path from the camp to the forest edge is walked again, different feet this time. A younger person following behind someone older, stepping where they step. Not because they have been told to, because it seems like the thing to do. Because the older person's feet seem certain and their own are still learning certainty. This is how the path becomes a lesson. Not a declared lesson, just a quiet inheritance of knowledge passed through the specific pressure of a footfall in soft earth. They walk to the place where the older person always looks first when they reach the tree line. The younger one looks there too. Nothing is said. Nothing needs to be. The looking becomes part of what it means to arrive here, and in a season, in two. The younger person will look at that same place first and will not remember learning to. There is a particular way of carrying things. A bundle rested on one shoulder and steadied with the opposite hand. A load balanced at the hips, leaning slightly forward. A child held close at the chest with the arm curved underneath. These positions were not designed. They were arrived at through failure and adjustment, through the ache of a poor position repeated too many times, through watching someone carry the same thing differently and doing better with it. The body is its own teacher when given enough repetition. It finds the path of least resistance and returns to it every time. The carrying position that works becomes the only carrying position. Within a generation, it begins to look like the right way, the obvious way, and the long history of trial that produced it disappears into muscle memory. In the middle of the day, at the highest heat, there is a stopping. This is not always a sleep. Sometimes it is just a slowing, a sitting in shade, a pause in the work of the day to eat something, to drink, to let the body's urgency ease a little. This pause appears in human cultures across wide distances and long stretches of time. The midday rest, the temporary truce between the body and the heat. Early communities did not necessarily plan this. They noticed it happening. They noticed that work done in the high heat was harder and slower and brought more mistakes than work done in the cooler hours. And so the habit formed around that observation. We stop at midday. Not because anyone decided, because stopping at midday works. The afternoon has a different quality than the morning. The light is different. The feel of the air is different, and so the kind of work shifts. The heavier tasks of early day give way to smaller work. Things that can be done while seated, things that do not require the full exertion of the body. Sorting, mending, scraping, pressing, smoothing, the hands stay busy, but the pace is different. This rhythm-heavy work in the cooler parts of the day, lighter work in the heat is one of the oldest working patterns humans have. It is not arrived at through thought. It is arrived at through the body's response to conditions, repeated enough times that the pattern becomes the plan. Someone near the edge of the camp is scraping a hide stretched between two short stakes. The movement is repetitive and controlled. A long stroke, then another. The same pressure, the same angle, over and over. There is something almost restful about it when watched from a distance. The rhythm of skilled, practiced work has that quality of effort that has become so familiar it no longer costs what it once cost. She learned this from watching. Then from being shown, then from doing it badly and being corrected gently by a hand placed over hers to guide the stroke, then from doing it badly on her own, then from doing it well enough, then from doing it without thinking about it at all. That last stage is the one that matters here. The moment when a skill passes through effort and arrives somewhere on the other side of it, where the hands know before the mind is consulted. The tools used every day develop their own places, not designated places, at first. Just the place where a tool ends up when it is set down, which is usually the place nearest to where it was last used, and that place gets used again and the tool gets set there again, and after a while the tool and the place become associated. Taking the tool from anywhere else would feel slightly wrong. Not urgently wrong, just slightly off. This is how the home begins to organize itself, not through planning, through repeated behavior settling into preference, settling into arrangement. The hearth in the center because fire belongs at the center. The sleeping place away from the entrance because the cold comes in through the entrance. The tools near the working place because that is where they always end up anyway. The arrangement of a shelter reflects the life lived inside it. The habits of its inhabitants are recorded in the placement of every object, in the worn places in the floor, in the ash deposits around the hearth. Archaeologists read these arrangements and from them reconstruct something of the daily lives of the people who left them behind. The habits outlast the people who held them. A group moves from one place to another. This is common in certain seasons, in certain places. The moving is not random. It follows paths established on previous journeys which followed signs in the land, the drainage of water, the ease of the terrain, the presence of trees, the position of the sun. Before any of this could be discussed in detail, it was understood through the experience of moving and finding and moving again. The pace of a group in motion develops its own rhythm. The faster walkers slow to match the slower ones, not as an act of charity necessarily, but because a group that separates becomes vulnerable in ways a group together is not. The pace is the group's pace. An agreement made without discussion and maintained without reminder. The stops along a known route have their own logic. The place to drink, the place to rest in shade, the place to cross the water. These are not marked, they are remembered. They pass from those who made the journey before to those making it now, through the act of stopping at the right place and the bodies of the younger ones following suit. Knowledge moves this way, by walking with those who already carry it. Someone has found a bush heavy with fruit. They do not eat all of it now. They take what they can carry and they return to the others. This is not generosity exactly, or not only that, it is a way of being in a group that works. Bringing back what you find, adding it to the shared supply. The person who always brings back more than they keep is a person others want to travel with. The habit of sharing is also a habit of social survival. Over time, in communities that remain in the same place for seasons or longer, the finding becomes more deliberate. The places where certain plants grow are remembered and revisited. The timing of when they fruit or seed is observed and noted across years. This is not yet agriculture. It is something before agriculture. Careful, patient attention to the patterns of the land. Early humans likely understood the cycles of plant growth in their territory in remarkable detail, far earlier than formal cultivation began. They knew what grew where and when. They knew which years were good and which would be thin. They adjusted their patterns around that knowledge. The knowing became the habit. There is a child watching an elder prepare something. The child does not ask questions. They are at the age where watching is enough, where the body is taking in information that will not be needed for years yet. The elder works without explanation, knowing the child is there, knowing the child is watching. This is the lesson. The watching and the doing beside each other. Sometime later, the child reaches for a tool to try the same motion. The first attempt is tentative. The second is a little more sure. The elder watches, does not step in unless the child asks or unless something is about to go wrong. There is patience on both sides. The learning is not rushed. Rushing it would produce a poor learner, and poor learners carry poor habits. And poor habits are hard to unlearn. The afternoon light is longer in some seasons and the work extends into the evening. In others, dark comes early and everything contracts around the fire. The pattern of daily life is not fixed. It breathes with the season. Longer days bring longer days of work and movement. Shorter days bring a different kind of attention, more inward, more domestic, more given to the tasks that can be done by firelight. Early humans likely slept in multiple shorter periods rather than one long stretch as we understand it today. The long, unbroken sleep came later, with different conditions. Before that, waking in the middle of the night was common, and those waking hours had their own gentle activity. Tending the fire, listening, a quiet kind of watchfulness before sleeping again. The night was not empty, it was just a different kind of time. There is a place along the river where the reeds grow thick and the water is calm. People have come here for as long as anyone can say. Not only for the reeds, though the reeds are useful, also because it is a meeting place. The kind of place that becomes a meeting place when two groups who move through different parts of the same landscape occasionally pass through the same calm water at the same time. When this happens often enough, an expectation forms. We will see them here. In this season. At this bend, the expectation becomes a plan, and the plan becomes an arrangement, and eventually the meeting at the calm bend of the river is something that is prepared for. Something gathered specifically for exchange. A habit of meeting that produces habits around the meeting. What passes between groups at these gatherings is more than objects. It is method, a way of working a material that one group knows and another does not. A plant used for one purpose here that is used differently elsewhere. The small differences in habit and technique that arise when people live in slightly different conditions. These travel in both directions. They are observed, imitated, taken home, tried, adjusted, and eventually absorbed. Human habits spread this way, not through instruction, through encounter and imitation. The fire at the center of the camp burns differently at different times of day. In the morning it is practical. In the evening it is something else. People gather near it not only for warmth, but for the gathering itself. The fire gives them a reason to be in the same place at the same time, to be near each other without purpose, which turns out to be a purpose in itself. Voices are lower in the evening. The pace of movement slows. Someone tells something that happened that day. Someone else responds. There is laughter sometimes silence that does not need filling. The habit of evening gathering around the fire is among the oldest social habits humans carry. The impulse to end the day in company, in warmth, in the shared acknowledgement that another day has passed and here we still are. Research suggests that the campfire and the social behavior it organized may have played a significant role in the development of language, storytelling, and shared group memory. The fire is not just warmth, it is context. The way people arrange themselves around a fire is not random. There is a geometry to it. Those who are central to the group find themselves near the center of the fire. Those who are newer, younger, or less certain of their place are further out. This is not assigned. It emerges. The positions shift over time as people's roles in the group shift. The fire records the social life of the group in the arrangement of bodies around it. Sitting near someone in the evening becomes a kind of communication, a choosing. Even if nothing is said, the proximity speaks. There are sounds that belong to morning, sounds that belong to the work of the day, sounds that belong to the evening. The human ear learns these distinctions early and begins to organize time by them. Before formal measures of time, time is felt, sensed, known through the quality of the light, the temperature of the air, the sounds that are happening, the sounds that have stopped. When something is out of place, a sound at the wrong time, a silence where there should be sound, the body responds before the mind can name what it has noticed. This is very old awareness. It is the awareness that kept people alive when the world had more things in it that could end them. That same awareness, channeled into daily life, becomes the habit of attention, of being present in the specific physical sense of noticing what is around you, what sounds are near, what the light is doing, what the air smells like. These were not idle observations. They were the reading of information that mattered. The seasons change, and the habits change with them. In the growing season, the days are organized around gathering and preparation. In the lean season, they are organized around conservation and patience. The two modes are different enough that they might seem like different lives, but they are held together by the routines that continue regardless of season. The fire, the waking, the tending, the gathering, the sleeping, the small repeated acts that make the days legible. There is a particular pleasure in the work of the hands when the hands know exactly what they are doing, when a task has been done often enough that the mind can wander while the hands continue. This state, which is something like effortlessness, is one of the rewards that habit produces. The investment of repetition paid back in the freedom to think of other things while the body does what it knows. Grinding grain in the mornings or scraping hides in the afternoons, or weaving the materials of a shelter, these become the backdrop to thought and conversation and the quiet drifting of an unoccupied mind. The habit carries the body. The mind goes somewhere else for a while. An older woman moves through the camp in the evening, pausing here, adjusting something there. Not with urgency. With the easy authority of someone who has tended this space for a long time. She knows which sleeping places are too damp. She knows which part of the fire burns hotter. She knows the sounds the children make when they are actually sick versus the sounds they make when they are avoiding sleep. None of this knowledge was recorded anywhere. It lives in her. It will pass to others, or some of it will, in the natural way that the knowledge of someone present and watchful passes to those around them. She pauses at the edge of the camp and looks out at the dark, not nervously, just as a habit of the day's end. A last check, a closing of the loop. Then she returns to her place by the fire. There are places in the camp that are always cleaner than others, not because someone decided they should be, because certain activities are always done there, and those activities leave less mess than others, and the people who use those spaces naturally keep them clear because a cluttered space makes the work harder. The cleaning is incidental, a function of the habit of work in a particular place. Over time, the habit of keeping a space clear becomes a habit of its own. A standard. The children who grow up in that space learn the standard without being told it. They absorb it by living inside it, by noticing what the adults do and what they do not allow. The tidiness passes from one generation to the next not as a lesson but as an atmosphere. This is one of the quietest ways that culture travels. Not in explicit teaching, in the small constant pressure of what is normal, what is usual, what is how things are done here. There is a path that runs along the high edge of the hill, from the camp toward the water on the other side. It was made by someone walking that way once, and then again, and then by others following. The path is older than anyone currently alive. It may be older than anyone who was alive when the camp first formed here. The people who first made it could not have imagined the number of feet that would follow. Walking a path someone else made is a quiet form of inheritance. You do not know who made it. You do not think about it. You simply go the way goes because the way is already there. The behavior of one person, repeated, becomes the default for many people who never knew that person and never thought about why the path goes where it goes. The habit outlives its origin. It becomes the landscape. There is a particular motion involved in starting a fire. Not the kindling and tinder version that comes later, but the earliest methods. The striking of stone on stone or the long, slow friction of wood against wood. This is not a motion that can be done casually. It requires a very specific technique, a particular pressure and angle and persistence, and it can go wrong in many ways. The person who can do it reliably is someone whose body has practiced until the doing is nearly automatic. Watching them do it, you see no struggle. The motion is smooth and confident. The sparks come when they should. The fire catches. But that ease is the result of 10,000 failures distributed across many years. The habit carries all of that invisible history inside it. When someone teaches fire making to another, they are not just teaching a technique. They are compressing years of failure into a teaching. They are giving the learner a shortcut through the accumulation of their own attempts. The learner still has to practice. But they begin further along the path than they would if they had started alone. The transfer of skill through teaching is also a transfer of habit. The teacher's way of holding the materials, the specific rhythm of the friction, the signs they read in the smoke or the ember, all of it passes along with the explicit instruction. The student learns the technique and the texture of attention that surrounds it. In settlements that remain in place for more than a season, the organization of space becomes more deliberate. Not planned in the modern sense, but managed. This area for this activity. That space near the water for washing. The drying place where the wind is good. The sleeping spaces arranged so that the youngest and most vulnerable are furthest from whatever might come in from outside. These arrangements do not appear fully formed. They grow. Someone notices a better way and changes their habit slightly, and others adjust around them, and eventually the new arrangement is just the arrangement. No one remembers it being different. The village, if we can call it that, becomes a record of its own history. The well-worn places speak to the most common paths. The cleared areas speak to the most common gatherings. The ash layers speak to the continuity of fire tending across seasons and years. Standing in such a place, if you know how to read it, you can feel the accumulated presence of the habits that shaped it. Someone is washing something in the shallow part of the stream, rubbing the cloth against the smooth stone, rinsing, rubbing again. The motion is habitual, the mind somewhere else. Behind them, a child is imitating the action at the edge of the water, too young to do it with any practical effect, but practicing the shape of it nonetheless. Learning the habit by rehearsing it before it is needed. Children are the most efficient learners of habit. They are structured to absorb what the adults around them do, to treat what they observe as the template for correct behavior, to practice it in their play before performing it in earnest. The child washing at the stream's edge is not pretending. They are acquiring. Early humans likely had a great deal of this kind of imitative learning. The adult world as curriculum. The daily routines of the camp as instruction in how to live inside them. The afternoon stretches out warm and unhurried. There is a quality to the light in the middle of a good afternoon that seems to slow time slightly. Things move, but more gently. The sounds of activity from the camp are comfortable, familiar at the right distance. Someone working nearby hums something that is not quite a song, a sound made for the benefit of no one, just the human need to occasionally fill silence with something softer than nothing. Music, or the precursor to music, is among the oldest of human habits. The humming while working. The rhythm of a repeated task matched by a vocalizing that echoes it. The singing that arises at the end of the day, or in the middle of a difficult piece of work, because the body finds that sound and effort go together more naturally than effort alone. No instrument. No purpose. Just the voice finding a groove to fit into, a small repetition made beautiful by its aimlessness. The collecting of things is a very old habit. Not hoarding. Not accumulating for accumulation's sake, but the keeping of certain objects that serve purposes beyond their immediate practical use. A particular stone that fits well in the hand. A shell found far from water that no one has been able to explain but no one wants to discard. A piece of wood with a grain that catches the light a particular way. These things are carried. When a group moves, some things are left behind and some things are taken. The things taken are the things that have accumulated some quality of meaning beyond their utility. They have become, through habit of carrying and returning to, small anchors of personal or group identity. The habit of object keeping is also a habit of memory. The object belongs to a moment, to a place, to a person no longer present. Carrying it is a way of carrying those connections forward. A man returns from a journey of several days, moving differently than when he left. Not injured, not unwell. Just different in the way a person is different after spending time away from everything familiar. He carries the small adjustments that distance makes in a person. He has slept in a different way. He has eaten at different times. His body has had to release the habits of the camp and adapt to the habits of being in motion in open terrain with different demands. Now he is back, and the adjustment flows the other way. His body recognizes the camp's rhythms and begins to return to them almost immediately. The specific place where he sits. The sounds that belong to evening here. The fire that burns a certain way at this hearth. Habit is also homecoming. The familiar patterns receive the returning body and say, "Here, this is how it goes." You remember. There is something in human memory that responds more readily to place than to anything else. Return to the place, and the body remembers what it did there. The habit does not need to be consciously recalled. The place recalls it. In the cooler months, the habits shift inward. Less ranging. More attention to shelter, to the fire, to the stores of food and material laid aside over the warmer seasons. The days are organized around a smaller radius. The camp itself becomes the world for a while. This contraction of the daily circle has its own particular quality. There is more time spent in proximity to the people you live with. More time for the kind of conversation and attention that busy days of ranging and gathering do not allow. The winter slowdown wherever it happens creates a different kind of communal life. The habits of winter are different habits, slower ones. The long work of repair and preparation, the extended time around the fire, the gathering of the group into closer physical proximity, for warmth as much as for company. The stories that get longer because there is more time for them. A particular story is told again, the same one, familiar to everyone present. The telling changes slightly from one telling to the next. The teller adds something, leaves something out, shifts the emphasis. Over many tellings, the story becomes something like a shared object. Everyone present holds a version of it in their memory, and each version is slightly different from the others, and yet they all agree on the shape. This is how memory moves through groups, not as fixed fact, as living, changing narrative. The telling is also the tending. Each repetition keeps the thing alive. Research suggests that oral traditions across cultures show remarkable stability even across hundreds of years. The core information preserved even as the telling adapts. The habit of repeating a story is also a technology of preservation. Spring brings its own set of habits back into motion. The longer days call for an earlier waking. The body is ahead of the habit, already oriented toward light and movement before the daily routines have fully resumed. There is an adjustment period where the two find each other again. The first days of real warmth after a cold season have a particular energy in them. Not urgency exactly, more like the feeling of a long-held posture finally releasing. The habits of winter fall away and the habits of the warmer months resurface, half remembered, half felt. The body knows them even when the mind is not sure. There is a path that goes toward the open ground and the hunting areas. It has been less traveled for months. The grass has crept back over the edges of it. The ground is softer than it was. The first people to walk it again in spring have to find it slightly, to trace its line through the new growth. But it is still there. The path does not forget, even when it is not used for a season. Along the water, in the spring, there is a particular gathering of people who come from different parts of the landscape to trade, to talk, to arrange things that cannot be arranged in isolation. This gathering has its own set of habits, different from the habits of daily camp life. The way arrivals are greeted, the sequence of activities, the particular space used for exchange, the time given before any serious matter is addressed. These social habits are among the most intricate that humans develop. They encode enormous amounts of information about relationship and trust and expectation. They tell you, if you know how to read them, what kind of community this is and how it manages its connections. A person who knows the habits of greeting in their own group arrives at a new group and is uncertain. The habits are different here, not dramatically different, subtly different in ways that carry meaning they cannot yet read. They watch. They adjust. They imitate carefully, knowing the imitation may be imperfect. Learning someone else's habits is one of the more demanding acts of social intelligence. It requires setting aside your own automatic behaviors long enough to observe and absorb different ones, and then tolerating the discomfort of doing things in an unfamiliar way until the new way settles into its own automaticity. A woman moves through the process of preparing a meal the way she always has. Sequence, rhythm, placement of tools, everything in its known order. This sequence was her mother's before it was hers. She watched it for years before she performed it. Now she performs it without watching herself. Her daughter, beside her, reaches for something at the wrong moment in the sequence and is gently redirected. Not harshly, just a hand, a slight adjustment. The right moment will come for that particular action. The sequence matters. The sequence is, in some sense, the knowledge. In every human tradition there are tasks where the order of operations is as important as the operations themselves, where deviation from the sequence produces a different, inferior result, where the habit is not just about efficiency but about quality. The right thing done in the wrong order is still the wrong thing. This knowledge also lives in the body. It is not memorized as a list. It is felt as the natural flow of motion. When something in the sequence is skipped, the body notices it as a kind of incompleteness, a task half done that feels done until you come back to it and realize something is missing. The grooming habits are among the most persistent. The daily actions of cleaning and maintaining the body and the body's adornment. These habits are deeply resistant to change because they are tied not just to cleanliness, but to identity, to the feeling of being oneself, of having tended the self in the ways that make the self recognizable. Early humans groomed each other. This is likely one of the oldest and most socially significant habits in the human repertoire. The care given to another body. The attention that grooming requires. The vulnerability of the person being groomed. The trust that it encodes. Sitting still while someone attends to your hair or your skin is one of the oldest acts of social bond. Doing it for another person is one of the oldest acts of care. The habit of mutual grooming carries all of that relational weight. There is a man working at the edge of the camp, scraping the last of the material from a bone. His hands move in a particular way, the grip adjusted, the angle of the scraper consistent. He has done this so many times that his hands have shaped themselves slightly to this task. The calluses are in exactly the right places. He does not think about what he is doing. He is thinking about something else entirely. About the route he plans to take tomorrow. About the sound he heard last night that he has not been able to identify. About nothing in particular. The work continues while the mind ranges. This capacity to do a complex physical task without conscious attention is the end state of long practice. It is what all habit aims for. the freeing of the mind from the management of the body. Once the body knows how to do something, the mind is released to do other things. The habit gives the mind back to itself. The evening gathers people again. The fire is higher. Someone has brought more wood. The light it throws is shifting, amber, not quite reaching the edges of the gathering but warm enough at the center. There are sounds from the darkness beyond the camp, the usual sounds, nothing alarming, and no one responds to them because no one needs to. The sounds are known sounds. The body has already assessed them and released them. A child who has been attempting to stay awake finally loses the argument with sleep and goes. The adults who remain sit a little more comfortably, the way adults do when the children have gone to sleep. Not very differently, just slightly. The conversation is low, not a particular conversation. The kind that does not go anywhere, that exists for the being together of it. Someone says something, someone responds. There is a silence. Then something else. The talk has the rhythm of breathing in and out, space between rather than the rhythm of information being transmitted. This social habit, the gathering, the low talk, the shared quiet, has no formal name, but it is among the most human of all the habits. The instinct to end the day in company, to not go directly from the activity of the day to the stillness of sleep, to spend a little time in the middle space where the day is slowly let go of in the presence of others. The fire burns lower. The conversation thins. People begin to go to their places, not with any announcement, just a movement here, a settling there. The camp gradually quiets from the outside in, those furthest from the fire going first, those closest staying a little longer. The last person to leave the fire tends it for the night, banks the embers, arranges things for the morning. This is done efficiently, without ceremony, but it is a task that carries a certain weight. The keeping of the fire through the night is the keeping of the camp's continuity. When the fire is tended, the camp survives. When it is not, the morning is harder. The habit of last tending is one that belongs to someone particular, usually, though it rotates or transfers as circumstances change. It is a responsibility that is not discussed. It is known. The person who carries it is trusted with something everyone depends on, and they carry that trust in the small, quiet ritual of the final tending. Then they too go to their place, and the camp is still. In the dark and the quiet, the small sounds of sleep replace the sounds of day. The breathing that deepens, the settling of the body into the ground, the occasional murmuring that does not fully wake the murmurer. These sounds are also known sounds. The body of each person in the camp exists in a kind of peripheral awareness for every other person. A change in those sounds, a sharp cry, a sudden silence would be noticed. The awareness does not switch off, it merely dims. Before the full dark of sleep, the mind moves through its own unpatterned territory. The day's images, rearranged, half-formed thoughts about tomorrow's tasks drifting in and out. The sensation of the body growing heavy, the limbs surrendering their readiness, the jaw releasing the slight tension it has held all day. The last few moments before sleep are almost indistinguishable from sleep itself. The thoughts become less coherent, less consecutive. They stop completing themselves. The mind moves from associating to simply floating until that too falls away. Across many generations, the habits of a group accumulate into something with more structure. What began as practical adaptation, sleeping away from the drafty entrance, tending the fire at certain intervals, gathering near water, becomes, over time, something that feels inevitable. The arrangement of the camp is simply how camps are arranged. The order of the morning's tasks is simply the order of the morning's tasks. The habit of meeting here, in this season, is simply what people do. No one decided any of it. It arrived through the long repetition of what worked, observed and copied by those who were watching, passed forward into a future whose inhabitants would not know the difference between what they chose and what they inherited. This is the quiet work of culture, not the grand inventions, not the singular moments, the slow sedimentation of repeated behavior into expectation, and expectation into norm, and norm into the texture of life itself. There is a path worn between two settlements, traveled often enough over many seasons that it has become a reference point in the landscape. People who have never met agree on where it goes, where it crosses the water, and where it is safest to cross. Which part of the journey is the hardest and which part opens up into easier going. The path carries all of this accumulated knowledge in its own geography. Walking the path is also walking through the decisions of everyone who made it what it is. Where it bends around a bog, where it rises to take the higher ground before a descent, where it straightens because the terrain there gives nothing to avoid. Each feature of the path is a decision that became a habit that became a landmark. Future walkers will not think about the decisions, they will simply walk where the path goes. The habits of food preparation are among the most persistent and specific. The way a particular food is treated, dried, ground, soaked, heated, reflects a long history of experimentation and failure and eventual success. The processes often span centuries. The reasons for them can be lost entirely while the habit persists. A person who prepares a food in a particular way because their family always has is carrying, without knowing it, the accumulated food knowledge of every generation before them that made the same choice. The process may have originally been about safety, removing something toxic through cooking, preventing spoilage through drying. By the time it reaches this person, it is simply tradition. It is how you do it. The practical logic has become invisible inside the habit. There is something quietly remarkable about this, that the intelligence of a long-dead person can reach forward in time through the persistence of a habit they established, and protect someone who will never know they existed. The patterns of seasonal preparation are also habits built from knowledge, the harvesting of particular things at their peak, the setting aside of what can last, the knowing of which abundance to preserve and which to enjoy in its moment and release. These are complex bodies of knowledge encoded in practical routines so familiar they require no thought. People who live this way know the world in enormous detail. They know their specific landscape the way others know a language fluently, effortlessly, with the ability to read it in conditions that would look like nothing to an outsider. The habit of attention to the landscape is a habit so old it might not feel like attention at all. It might just feel like seeing. In the cooling of the late afternoon, when the direct light is gone but the warmth still holds, there is a quality of ease in the camp. The urgent tasks of the day are done or close enough to done. The final tasks before evening are not yet pressing. There is a pocket of time that belongs to no particular obligation. People use it in their own ways. Some continue working at whatever is in their hands. Some set the work aside and simply sit. Some move through the camp attending to nothing specific. Children run with the freedom of the hour. The older members of the group occupy the places they always occupy at this time of day, doing the things they always do. The pocket of free time has become, through repetition, its own kind of structure. The habits of leisure, if we can call them, that are as durable as the habits of work. The specific way each person inhabits the late afternoon has settled into its own groove and follows its own routine. Freedom, in this sense, is also a habit. In settlements where people remain across many seasons, the daily patterns begin to shape the land in visible ways. The worn track from the shelter to the water. The ash circle at the center of the clearing, built up over years until the soil beneath it is black and dense. The place where the refuse accumulates, always downwind, always far enough from the fire that no one has to think about it. The post holes where a shelter frame has stood season after season, repaired and rebuilt, but always in the same spot because the ground there drains well and the angle of the slope provides some shelter from the wind. These marks are slow. They take years to become visible. But they are persistent. They are the record that habit leaves in the earth. There are habits of posture, the way a person sits when they are at ease, the angle of the back when carrying a heavy load, the particular fold of the arms when resting. These too are learned. They come from the body's long negotiation with gravity and effort and fatigue. They come from watching others and absorbing the shapes they make. A young person in a new group unconsciously adopts the postures of those around them, not because they are performing belonging, though in some sense they are, because the body is a social instrument. It takes its cues from the bodies near it. The habit of posture is also the habit of being located somewhere specific, in a particular group with particular people who hold themselves in particular ways. The marks of belonging are often physical and below the level of conscious decision. Along the forest edge in the late afternoon, someone is moving slowly, pausing often. They are reading the ground, the bark, the bending of stems, and the disturbance in the leaf litter. They have walked this edge many times. They know its ordinary state so thoroughly that any deviation registers immediately. A bent branch, a cluster of flies where there were none before, the place where the soil has been recently turned. This is expert attention, not the attention of someone looking for something in particular. The attention of someone who knows what the ordinary looks like and therefore instantly recognizes what is not ordinary. It is a skill built so deep into the habit of observation that it operates without effort. You develop this kind of attention by spending enormous amounts of time in the same place, by returning to it again and again until the place is as known to you as your own shelter, as your own hands. Then the reading is automatic. The habit of knowing becomes the habit of noticing what is new. Someone is repairing a tool, a handle that is cracked, being worked back to usefulness with careful hands. This repair is not the first one this tool has needed. The handle bears the marks of previous repairs, older ones, done by hands that are no longer here. The tool has outlasted the person who made it. It is on its third handle, maybe more. The blade or stone is the original piece, the one with value, the one that gets passed along. The handles are just the part that wears out and gets remade. There is a habit of repair that is also a habit of conservation, not discarding what can be restored. Recognizing the difference between what has failed entirely and what only needs attention. This distinction between the salvageable and the spent is practical knowledge of a high order. It saves effort. It preserves the accumulated work embedded in the object. The repaired tool, handed eventually to someone younger, carries the weight of all the use that has gone into it. Using it is also inheriting it. The morning after a night of rain. The ground is different. The paths hold water in their low points. The air smells of everything that was dry becoming wet. The camp is slower to begin. The fire is harder to coax. Things that were straightforward yesterday are more effortful today. The habits adapt, not dramatically. The morning routine holds its shape, but its contents shift. The fire starting takes longer and more material. The path to the water is walked more carefully. The tasks that depend on dry conditions are set aside in favor of those that can manage wet. This flexibility within the pattern is also a kind of habit. The knowing of which parts of the routine are fixed and which are responsive. What the day's core requirements are and how they can be met in different conditions. The ability to hold the form of a day even when its material circumstances change. The rain is not a problem for someone whose habits are flexible enough to accommodate it. It is just another kind of morning. In a village now rather than a camp. The difference is more a matter of degree than kind. More people, more settled, more infrastructure accumulated around the patterns of daily life. A well or a designated place to draw water, worn smooth by the sequence of people who have drawn water there every day. A common fire or a series of hearths that share fuel and warmth. A designated place for certain activities that has been recognized as such for long enough that it would feel strange to do those things elsewhere. The village has the same habits as the camp, expanded and elaborated. The fundamental pattern of daily human life, waking, tending, working, eating, gathering, resting, is the same. What changes is the context around it, the number of people, the permanence of the structures, the complexity of the social arrangements, and with that complexity comes a new layer of habits. The habits of community, the expectations of neighbors, the implicit agreements about noise and space and shared resources that no one stated but everyone holds. The habit of greeting certain people in a certain way. The habit of avoiding certain topics in certain company. The habit of deference to certain kinds of experience and the habit of responsibility toward those who need tending. These social habits are the framework of community life. They are learned through years of participating in the community through the accumulation of small interactions that teach the implicit rules of being in this particular group of people. They are not written anywhere. They are practiced everywhere. A child who grows up inside these habits will not know what they have learned. They will only know how to be in this community. That knowing is the habit. There is a tool made specifically for a task that only needs doing in a certain season. The rest of the year it stays in its place, wrapped or stored, not forgotten, but not present in daily awareness. When the season comes and the task begins, the tool is retrieved and the hands rediscover it. There is a brief reacquaintance. The grip that was natural before becomes natural again after a few moments. The habit that was dormant returns. Seasonal habits have this quality. They are not lost in the off-season. They are stored. The body keeps them somewhere below the level of daily use and retrieves them when the conditions call for them. Years later, many seasons on, the same motion returns in the same body, slightly more practiced, slightly more automatic. The refinements of age added to the foundations of early learning. There is something reassuring about this, that the body does not forget what it has learned, even when it does not use it. That the knowledge is not only in the mind, where it might be argued with or doubted, but in the hands, which simply remember when the time comes. The habit of watching the sky is one of the oldest. Not stargazing in the romantic sense, the practical, constant monitoring of what the light and cloud and wind direction are doing. Because the sky is one of the primary sources of information about what the next hours and days will bring. People who spend their days outdoors read the sky without thinking about it. The quality of the light at mid-morning that suggests rain before evening. The particular stillness of the air before a change in temperature. The way the birds move before certain kinds of weather arrives. These signs are read continuously, below the level of thought, integrated into the ongoing background assessment of conditions. The habit of sky reading is a habit of constant environmental monitoring. It is not passive. It is active engagement with the information the environment is always producing, filtered through long experience of what those signs reliably mean. Someone who has lived in the same landscape for many years knows its weather the way they know the faces of their family. Instantly, without calculation. Late in a village's history, if a village can be said to have a history of its own, certain habits become formalized. The informal meeting at the central fire becomes a recognized gathering with a recognized time. The general practice of sharing food at certain moments becomes an understood expectation with social weight behind it. The informal leadership of the person with the most experience becomes a recognized role with recognized responsibilities. The habit hardens into institution. Not overnight, over the long accumulation of the habit being taken more and more seriously, being invested with more and more significance until the flexibility that was always there has disappeared into the rigidity of custom. This too is a kind of habit, the habit of organizing around habits, of turning what works into what is expected, of codifying the practical into the obligatory. The obligation carries forward. The next generation inherits not just the habit, but the sense that the habit is required, that it would be wrong to do otherwise, that the way things have been done is a reason for doing them that way. And they pass that sense forward to the generation after, who will feel it even more strongly, having inherited it twice removed from any practical origin. A long time later, in a different kind of village, one with more structure, more permanence, someone is going through the motions of a daily task that has been performed in this settlement every single morning since before they were born. They do it because it is the morning task. Because it belongs to this time of day in this place. Because the person who taught them to do it said it should be done this way, and that person learned it the same way. Why is it done this way? Hard to say exactly. It has always been done this way. The practical origins of the habit are so old now that they are not accessible. The habit has outlived its reasons and is now maintained by the weight of its own continuity. This is also a human thing. The persistence of habit beyond its justification. The comfort of the familiar as a reason in itself. The maintenance of custom because the custom is the thread connecting the present to the past. And the thread matters even when no one can say exactly where it leads. In the fields now, in a settled place, the habits of the growing season are layered and specific. The order in which fields are worked. The particular care given to certain plantings at certain stages. The attention to water and drainage. The seasonal calendar observed not in numbers but in the cues of the land itself when certain birds return, when certain plants emerge, when the light angle changes in a way that signals the shift of seasons. This knowledge is vast. It took generations to accumulate. It lives in the practices of the people working the land, encoded in their daily habits of observation and response. A poor harvest is examined for what it teaches. A good harvest is noted for what conditions produced it. The learning is constant, quiet, and cumulative. The farmer who has worked the same land for 40 years carries an enormous amount of information in their habits. Their hands know the soil in different parts of the field. Their body knows how to move through the work of each season. Their eye knows which plants need what and when. None of this was learned from a book. It was learned from the land, by paying attention to it every day for a very long time. The habit of attention becomes knowledge. The knowledge becomes habit. The evening gathering in a settled village has different qualities than the campfire gathering of earlier, smaller, more mobile groups. There are more people. The relationships are more varied and complex. Some of the gathering is social in the simple sense. Some of it serves functions that larger groups need, the settling of disputes, the planning of shared work, the transmission of decisions that affect everyone. But the underlying impulse is the same, the human instinct for ending the day in company. For the specific social experience of being together at the day's close, in the warmth, with the work behind you. This impulse is so old and so persistent that it survived the enormous changes of human life across thousands of years. The social habit of the communal evening outlasted the conditions that first produced it. It went from the campfire to the village fire to the central square to the dining hall to the tavern to the sitting room. The setting changed completely. The habit held. The fire burns lower. The conversation thins. People begin to go to their places. This too. Everything becomes quieter, again, as it always does. The people who are still awake are the people who always stay a little later than the others. This is also a kind of habit. Belonging to the late edge of the evening gathering. Being among those who are last to go, there is a quality of companionship in that shared habit. the small fraternity of those who linger. They are not doing anything different from what they were doing earlier. But there are fewer of them now, and the fire is lower, and the night is fuller around them, and something in that combination has its own particular texture. When the last of them finally goes, the camp or the village settles into its night version of itself. Quieter, slower, the fires down to their embers. The paths empty, the work areas at rest. The morning will feel it all again. The waking, the fire tending, the first path walked to the first task. The sequence that has been repeated so many thousands of times that it has become the shape of a day. That shape is not universal. Every culture, every place, every era produced its own particular version of the human day, its own sequence of habits, its own arrangement of tasks and rest and gathering. But the underlying architecture, the diurnal rhythm, the tending, the social gathering, the sleep that appears everywhere. It is what the human animal does when left to organize its own life. The variation is infinite. The pattern is very old. And you are in it now, wherever you are, whatever the specifics of your day were, the particular habits it contained, the routines you moved through, the small repeated actions you performed. Without noticing them, you are in the same pattern. The same large rhythm that has held all the days of all the human generations that preceded you. The waking came this morning. The day had its shape. The evening brought its gathering, even if the gathering was quiet or solitary or different from what it once was. And now the day is ending. The habits have carried you through it. They always do. Now the weight of the day is beginning to move to the edges of your awareness. The details are softening. The specific demands of the particular hours just past are releasing their hold, the way they always do when the body starts to understand that the day is over and there is nothing more it needs to do tonight. Let them go. The way people in every era have let the day go at its end, releasing it not with any particular gesture, but with the simple withdrawal of attention. The day was. It is going. It will be remembered or not in the ordinary way of things. Your body knows what comes next. It has known since long before you did. The slowing of the breath, the heaviness of the limbs, the gradual softening of the posture that has held all day. Let it go that way. Gradually, the way the fire goes. Slowly, without drama, the light pulling back from the edges until only the warmth remains. There is nothing to resolve tonight. The habits will be there when the light returns. The path will be there, the tools. The sequence of the morning's tasks, all of it waiting patiently in the same place it always is. For now there is only this. The ending of the day. The beginning of the rest. Let the sounds around you be what they are. Known sounds. Sounds that require no response. Let your thoughts loosen their order. Let them drift into the less consecutive territory that always comes before sleep. The fragments that don't need completing. The images that don't require understanding. The fire is very low now. The camp is quiet. The path from the water runs through the dark. The body remembers it, even now, even as it releases the day. Everything is in its place. Rest now. The habits are keeping everything. You don't have to. There are people at the edge of the field doing something that looks, from a distance, like nothing in particular. Getting closer, you see that they are pressing seeds into the ground, one by one, in rows that follow the gentle slope of the land. The act is simple and slow and requires a particular kind of attention, not the sharp attention of danger or difficulty, but the patient, sustained attention of work that cannot be rushed and does not reward hurry. This is how a great deal of human work gets done. Not quickly, not dramatically, but with a steady patience that is itself a kind of skill. The ability to repeat an action thousands of times without allowing the repetition to become careless, to give the same care to the 1,000th seed that was given to the first. The people pressing seeds into the ground have done this every planting season for as long as they can remember, and their parents did it before them, and the way they do it, the spacing, the depth, the direction of the row carries the accumulated wisdom of all those seasons. Some of what they do has a practical reason that is still known. Some of it has a practical reason that has been forgotten, and the doing of it continues anyway on the strength of the pattern itself. The seeds go in, the earth closes over them. The work moves forward along the row. There is a sound the mortar makes when the grain is ground with some skill and some force, a particular hollow rhythm that carries across the space of the working area in the morning. It is not background noise. It is one of the sounds that tells you what time it is, what the day is doing, which tasks are underway. The grinding is a morning sound. Later in the day, the mortar is quiet. The woman grinding does not count the strokes. There is no need to count. The hands know when it is enough. The meal has a certain quality when it is ready, a texture, a look, a fine powder rising from the rim, and the hands stop when they arrive there, without any instruction from the mind. The skill has made the judgment automatic. She has ground grain in this mortar for most of her adult life. Her mother ground it before her in the same mortar, and before that, the mortar belonged to someone she did not know. The stone is heavy and pale, slightly concave from years of use, the depression worn by the very work it enables. The tool and the task have shaped each other. Setting the mortar aside when the grinding is done, she does not put it anywhere in particular. It goes to its place, which is the place it always goes, the place that is its place because it has always been put there. The habit of placement. Somewhere further along the settlement, near the place where the river bends and the bank is low, someone is carrying water back. The vessel used for this is a particular shape, evolved over many attempts, suited to the task in ways that are not immediately obvious unless you have tried to carry water in a vessel that was not suited to the task. The weight distribution. The opening that allows for easy filling but does not slosh. The shape that can be balanced on the hip or the head or carried against the chest, depending on the distance and the terrain. This vessel was not designed by one person. It was arrived at through the slow improvement of many attempts across many generations, each generation inheriting a version slightly better than the one before, making small adjustments that were retained in the next iteration. The vessel carries the collected intelligence of everyone who carried water before. The person using it does not think about any of this. They carry the water. They return. They set the vessel down in its place. The dog at the edge of the camp is part of the habitual scene of the settlement. Not a wild animal and not quite a domestic one in the modern sense. something in between. It has been here, or a version of it has been here, for a long time. It eats what is left, it sleeps near the warmth. It is aware of the humans, and the humans are aware of it without either party thinking about the arrangement very much. This relationship, the long, quiet negotiation between humans and certain animals that chose proximity, is one of the oldest habitual arrangements in human history. Early humans likely had these associations with dogs well before formal domestication. The camp is a place with reliable food scraps and warmth. The dog near the camp is a reliable early warning of things approaching from outside. Neither party articulated the arrangement. Both kept it. The presence of the dog at the edge of the camp is a habit of mutual tolerance that extended, over an enormous span of time, into something considerably more. In the shade of the structure, in the afternoon, several people are doing different things in proximity to each other. One is working on something with their hands. Another is watching the children. Another seems to be resting, eyes half open. There is intermittent conversation, not sustained. Comments offered into the shared air of the space, responded to or not, with no obligation either way. This kind of companionable working proximity is a very specific social habit. Being in the same space as others without necessarily interacting with them. Doing your own work while remaining within the ambient awareness of the group. It is different from working alone and different from working together. It is its own thing. A shared space that allows both solitude and company simultaneously. People in such situations are aware of each other without being engaged with each other. The sounds of each other's work and breathing and small movements create a kind of mutual background presence. Nobody is alone. Nobody is required to engage. This habit of proximity persists. It appears in every settled community. The workshop where several people do separate work in shared space. The common area where different activities happen near each other. The bench at the market where people sit and watch and occasionally speak. The human need to be near others without always having to be with them is very old. The habit of providing for that need in the arrangement of shared spaces is nearly as old. There is a hill above the settlement that some people go to at the end of the day. Not all people, not every day. But sometimes, the habit of going to the high place for the view of the day's ending. The particular quality of light at that hour seen from that height, which is different from the light seen at the level of the settlement. The way the landscape spreads out and the distant features, the river bend, the tree line, the other hills become visible in a way they are not when you are moving through them. Going to the high place at the end of the day is a habit of perspective, of briefly inhabiting a vantage point that releases the close-up concerns of the settlement and places them against a larger context. From up here, the settlement looks small and quiet. The sounds of it carry up but softly. The smoke of the fires is visible, rising thin and pale into the evening light. The person standing here does not think about why they came. They came because the day's end calls for it, somehow, because this is what they do at this hour, or some days, or today. Then they walk back down. The tools of a craftsperson are arranged in a particular order that reflects the order of their use. The first tool used in a task is nearest. The last tool, which is also the finishing tool, is the one touched most often in the final stages and so has its own wear, its own patina that is different from the others. The arrangement of a craftsperson's tools is the arrangement of their knowledge. You could read from it the sequence of their work without asking them. When the craftsperson is gone for the day, or eventually for good someone else who knows the work can come to that arrangement and find it legible. The tools say, "This is how we do this here. This is the order. This is what matters." Craft knowledge is among the most durable kinds of human habit. The specific techniques for making specific things tend to be stable across very long periods. The way a joint is fitted. The way a particular material is treated before working. The sequence of steps that produces a reliable result. These can survive for generations almost unchanged because the material requirements of the task enforce a consistency that personal preference cannot entirely override. The basket has to be woven in a certain way or it fails. The pot has to be fired in a certain way or it cracks. The technique that works is the technique that persists, generation after generation, because the failure of deviation is immediate and instructive. Someone is teaching someone younger to make a particular thing. The teaching is mostly demonstrative. The teacher does the action. The learner watches. Then the learner tries. The teacher watches. The feedback is immediate and specific, not that, this, not this angle, that angle. The hand corrected by the hand. This method of teaching demonstration, imitation, correction is very old. It predates language as a sufficient means of instruction. Some kinds of knowledge cannot be adequately described. They can only be shown and then practiced until the showing and the doing have merged into the knowing. The learner will eventually teach someone in exactly this way. They will demonstrate without fully knowing why they do it that particular way, only that it works, that it is how it is done. The chain of demonstration extends backward and forward through time in a continuous line. It is one of the most human of all chains. In a market, or what serves as a market, the regular gathering place for exchange among people from different parts of the surrounding area, the habits of transaction are highly specific. Who approaches whom? How the opening of a transaction is signaled. The sequence of offer and counteroffer that is understood to be the correct form. The moment when an agreement has been reached, which may not be announced but is mutually understood. These transaction habits are so finely calibrated that a person unfamiliar with them makes small errors that the experienced parties notice immediately. The wrong sequence. The wrong timing. The gesture that misreads the stage of negotiation. The transaction habits encode a great deal of social information about relative status and relationship and expectation. Outsiders are legible as outsiders, partly through their failure to perform these habits correctly. The corrected habit, once the outsider has learned the right sequence, is the admission into the social world of exchange. The habit is a gate. At dusk, the children are called in from wherever they have dispersed to during the day's free hours. This call, however it is made, in whatever form it takes in this particular settlement, is itself a deeply habitual act. The particular sound or signal used for this purpose has been used for long enough that the children respond to it automatically. or semi-automatically. The way people respond to any signal that has been reliably paired with a consequence over enough repetitions. The children come in from the edges of the settlement. Some readily, some after a delay that tests the patience of whoever called. The transition from the diffuse freedom of the day to the closer confines of the evening is a daily negotiation, and the negotiation is also a habit. The small resistance and the small insistence and the eventual return to the hearth. This happens. It has always happened. The child who today resists being called in will one day be the person doing the calling. They will use the same call, or one close to it. They will not think about where it came from. It will simply be the call for coming in, which is what you use when you need the children to come in. The habit transfers across the generation, from the called to the calling, from the resistant to the insistent. The form persists even as the people inside it change completely. On the day after a hard night, a night of wind or cold or some disturbance that prevented the usual sleep, the habits of the morning are slower and slightly off. The fire tending done with less precision. The morning tasks begun and paused and begun again. The usual sequence interrupted by the need to rest briefly, to catch what was lost in the night. The habits do not disappear in difficult conditions. They slow, they stagger, they come in the wrong order sometimes. But they reassert themselves. By mid-morning the day has found its shape again, even if that shape is a dimmer version of itself. The routines are persistent. They want to run. They run even imperfectly, even on the difficult days, because the alternative days with no routine at all is considerably more wearing on the people who have to live them. The difficulty of unstructured time is something humans discover when habit is removed. What do we do when we don't know what to do? The anxiety of the open, unstructured day. The way people rush to fill it, to create temporary routines to replace the ones that have disappeared. The habit is not just efficiency. It is structure, and structure is something the human organism actively seeks and actively maintains. Near the river, in a particular place that has been used for washing for a long time, the bank is worn smooth. The ground where people kneel to do their work is packed and bare. The stones at the water's edge that serve as useful surfaces are arranged, or semi-arranged, in a way that has been found useful and so has been maintained. Nobody decided to maintain it. People just put the stones back when they move them, because the arrangement is useful, and useful arrangements are self-maintaining. The washing place is one of the social hubs of the settlement in a low-key way. People come there at similar times of day, and the work done there is compatible with conversation slow, rhythmic, not requiring complete concentration. Things are exchanged there. Information, mostly. The particular exchanges that happen in the washing place are different from the exchanges that happen at the fire in the evening. The time of day is different, the task is different, the people present may be different. Each gathering place in the settlement has its own social character. These characters were not assigned. They emerged from the nature of the tasks done there and the patterns of who came at what time. And then the characters became expected. The washing place is where you hear the news of the settlement in the morning, not because anyone decided that. because it always has been. The habit of where to go for what kind of information is a social habit of some sophistication. It requires knowing the settlement's geography not just spatially, but socially. Which space holds which conversations, where things are discussed that would not be discussed elsewhere. The informal map of information flow. Newcomers to a settlement must learn this map as part of learning how to live in the settlement. They must discover, through participation and observation, not just where things are, but what happens there. A fire maintained through a long winter. Not just the single night's fire, but the continuity of fire across many weeks of cold. This requires a particular discipline of attention and material management. Someone is always aware of the fire's state. The supply of fuel is managed. The quality of the burn is monitored. This is not dramatic or demanding work, it is steady work. Patient work. The kind of work that does not announce itself. The person responsible for this during the hard weeks of cold has a particular relationship with the fire. They check it when they wake in the night. They carry a certain awareness of it even when they are doing other things. If the fire were to fail, the consequences would be immediate and serious. The weight of this awareness shapes the way they move through the day and the night. When spring finally comes and the maintenance becomes less critical, they adjust, but the adjustment takes time. The habit of heightened attention to the fire does not disappear immediately when the necessity of it does. It gradually releases as the warmer weather makes the stakes lower, until the next winter when it will reassert itself. This is one of the ways seasons shape the specific texture of habits, not just which habits are needed, but how intensely they are held. A grandmother moving through the settlement in the morning checking things, not in any official capacity, just doing what she has always done, which is knowing the state of things. She knows the people in the settlement, and she notices when something about one of them seems different. She notices the state of the stores. She notices the condition of the working areas. None of this is her assigned responsibility. It is her habit. It is what she does. This habit of monitoring, of maintaining a continuous low-level awareness of the well-being of the group, is one of the most valuable contributions any member of a community can make. It costs something in attention and time. It produces no visible artifact. But the community that has someone like this is better informed about its own condition than the one that does not. The knowledge she carries is not recorded. It lives in her. When she is gone, some of it will be picked up by the people who learned it from her by proximity, by watching what she noticed and learning to notice those same things. Some of it will be lost, the way the knowledge of all individuals is ultimately partially lost. She is walking the settlement again, checking, noticing, the habit of care that has become, over many years, the habit of her days. The light is changing. The afternoon is tipping toward evening, and the quality of the light that comes with that tipping is particular to this time and this place and this season. It lands differently on the familiar surfaces. The shadow of the large tree at the settlement's edge falls in its accustomed direction. People are wrapping up the work of the day. Not all at once. At different paces in different ways. The wrapping up has its own habits. The return of tools to their places. the covering or securing of things that should not be left open, the check of what was started and whether it needs to be finished now or can wait. The habits of ending a workday are as specific as the habits of beginning one. The sequence of actions that signals to the body that the working part of the day is done. The putting away that says, "Here, this portion is complete. Tomorrow begins from here." Then, the pull toward the fire, the beginning of the evening's pattern. The fire is different now than it was this morning. It has been fed and neglected and fed again throughout the day. The ash around it has built up slightly. The hearth has the used, lived-in quality of something that has been in active service all day. Tending it now for the evening is a different act than the morning tending. Less urgent. More social. The people who gather around it for the evening gathering are not there only for warmth. They are there for this. The coming together at the end of the day. The children are closer to the fire now. The older ones have been drawn into the adult space by the evening, and the younger ones have given up on the edges of wakefulness and moved to their sleeping places. The middle ones are somewhere between, present but fading, held by the fire's pull against the pull of sleep. The adults talk. The evening conversation covers the day's events, plans for tomorrow, small observations. Nothing that rises to the level of urgency. This is the conversation of a day winding down. The social habit of the shared evening review. What happened? What is coming? How are we? Someone has a story. A longer one, not just an observation. The group settles into listening. The fire is the right height for this, not so bright that it distracts, not so dim that the circle contracts. The teller finds their pace. The listeners are not entirely still, hands still working at small tasks in the firelight. Bodies shifting, but their attention is present. The story belongs to this group and this fire and this evening. Tomorrow it will belong to memory, and in memory it will begin to change, the way all stories begin to change from the moment they are told. But tonight it is whole and present and shared. The fire holds. Everything slows. The night is settling in around the settlement the way it always does, from the edges inward, the dark coming first where the fire's light does not reach. The familiar boundaries of the place are becoming invisible. The known landscape, so readable in daylight, now exists only as shapes and sounds and the reliable weight of memory. The last conversations are shorter, the spaces between them longer. One by one, then in pairs, then in silence, the people leave the fire for their sleeping places, the same places they always go. The habit of where you sleep is one of the most fixed habits of all. The specific location, the specific position, the specific orientation. The body settles into the known groove of its habitual rest. The last of them goes. The fire is tended for the night. The settlement breathes slowly in the dark. The habits are all held, waiting. The morning will come and they will be needed again and they will be there. They are always there. The path from the water is there in the dark, invisible but known. The tools are in their places. The seeds pressed into the ground are doing what seeds do, which is wait for what comes next. The vessel that carried water today will carry water again. All of it waiting. all of it held in the long patience of what has always been done and will always be done in the way of human things. Let the fire be low, let the settlement breathe, let the habits rest. You too. The day is complete. Let it go now. Simply rest. Simply that. There are people who have never met each other who share the same habits. Not because they learned from each other, because they are responding to the same conditions, the same terrain, the same climate, the same requirements of the body in a particular kind of life. When you see their practices side by side, they are remarkably similar even across the distance that separates them. This convergence is one of the quiet things about human habit, that necessity produces similar solutions, that the human body's requirements, being constant, produce constant responses, that across enormous distances and without any communication, people arrive at the same morning routines, the same ways of carrying, the same patterns of rest. The habit is not only cultural, it is also biological. The body has its own requirements that shape behavior independently of what is learned or taught. The habit of sleeping at night or in the cooler parts of the day is a response to the body's own internal rhythms. The habit of eating before certain kinds of exertion is a response to the body's need for fuel. The habit of washing is a response to the body's need for maintenance. Culture shapes the specifics. Biology shapes the frame. And the two together produce the enormous variety of human habit that, looked at from a distance, all follows the same large pattern. There is a very small habit that is easy to miss. Someone picking up a piece of material, examining it for a moment, setting it down. Then picking it up again. This is not indecision. It is a form of knowing. The hands are reading the material, gathering information that will inform what comes next. The picking up and setting down and picking up is part of the assessment, not separate from it. This habit of tactile examination is very old. The hands as sensing instruments. The knowledge that comes through touch that cannot come through looking. The weight of a thing, the temperature of it, the particular resistance it offers to pressure. All of this information is gathered in the moment of handling, and the hands have learned what to do with it. The person who knows their materials knows them through their hands. The habit of touching, holding, turning, testing is the habit of knowledge in its most direct form. As the day in the settlement winds toward its close, there is a moment of particular quiet that falls between the end of work and the beginning of the evening gathering. A kind of pause. The tasks are done or suspended. The fire has been built up. The group is not yet assembled. The day hangs briefly between its two social modes. In this pause, people do particular things, small, private things. The checking of something personal. The moment of being alone before the evening's company. The brief withdrawal into the self that is made possible by the pause between the day's two kinds of time. This pause is a habit too, though it is perhaps the most invisible of habits. The interior pause. The brief claiming of solitude inside the structure of community. The breath taken between the full exhale of the workday and the full inhale of the evening gathering. Every era of human life has contained this pause. The moment before the evening begins. the few minutes of being alone between the day's obligations. The habit of interiority inside the structure of social life. It is very small. It passes quickly. It is gone before anyone would have words for it. Then the gathering begins. The fire draws the people back together. The evening voices rise around it. The day moves toward its end. And the habits hold. The same habits that held yesterday. The same habits that will hold tomorrow. The long, patient, ordinary habits that make a human life legible to the body that is living it. Here, this is how it goes. You know. You have always known.